Welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles live stream 2026, number 2. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We've got a little bit to update you on, so we've got some news, views, debate, and so on. So yeah, really, really cool to have you here. And again, Martin, thank you also. Hopefully you're hearing the sound now. That should all be coming through now unless something's wrong. So if you could post in chat, that'd be great, but I'm pretty sure you should be hearing it now, even after the delay. So yeah, got a little bit to cover. Just before we get into that, I'll just do my little pimping sales pitch up front. So we do appreciate if you could considering joining our either Patreon or YouTube membership. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate that. It does help us keep this little show afloat. It's not a cheap show to run with all this technology and talking to guests and stuff. And you do get some perks of being a member of either the YouTube channel or the Patreon membership. After we record each interview, what we do is we post a snippet to both those, it's to our subscribers or Patreon members. So you actually get an inkling of upcoming guests, sometimes up to 6 or 8 weeks before, and we try and find a particularly interesting bit. So yeah, there are some other perks. There's some custom emojis, a whole bunch of other stuff. We try and give you heads up on future guests. You get the opportunity to ask questions of guests, and you even get the opportunity to come on and ask the guest a question yourself. We are actually always supportive of guest co-hosts where feasible. It's not always feasible, but we love doing it where we can. Pimping over. So I'm glad I'm coming through loud and clear. So I've now said that all twice. I thought I'd jump in because I know a lot of our players tend to use software plugins, and I think I mentioned briefly last stream that Native Instruments had gone into some sort of preliminary insolvency proceedings. I know it came to light just in the last couple of days that they've actually formally entered insolvency. It appears nothing's changed as far as they're still saying the products are still available. They'll still be supporting and maintaining everything, and they're still hopeful of finding a buyer. So, but for all of us out there that use Native Instruments plugins, and I know I do, both live and in my own recording stuff, we're all a little bit on tenterhooks going, gee, I hope someone buys this because it's such a great ecosystem. Between that and Cherry, I don't know how it survived. And then, I mean, there are other great, Cherry Audio, a whole bunch, Crow Hill, there's, just there's so many great ones out there. But I would argue Arturia and Native Instruments alongside the big Korg and Yamaha software suites, they're the behemoths, and I'd hate to see one of them fall over. So yes, it's just the insolvency stuff continues, but at this stage there's not a lot more clarity on what that actually means for the rest of us. The other one I wanted to cover, I know last I definitely talked about the 2026 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think I also mentioned then it's a highly contentious topic anyway. Most people think it's a bit of a farce now, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I still, for some bizarre reason, am fascinated by it. I just sort of give you an update on the 2026 fan vote. So for those unaware, there were 12 new nominees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, of which I think 6 are inducted. So the nominees go from Jeff Buckley, Joy Division and New Order as a joint nomination because obviously the members, there's a huge overlap there. Oasis, the Black Crowes, Melissa Etheridge, Iron Maiden, Lauryn Hill, Shakira, Mariah Carey, Wu-Tang Clan, Billy Idol, Sade, INXS, Luther Vandross, Pink, Phil Collins and New Edition. So they're the 12. Now, there is a fan vote. It only counts a tiny proportion to the final result. And at the moment, and it blows my mind, New Edition are leading. So there's about 6, I'll just have a quick look. I think there's about 6 million, 6.158 million fan votes at this stage. Remembering that people can vote multiple times. I think I voted 4 or 5 times, and that it's condoned. It's transparent that that's the case. So it's not 6.1 million people have voted. I'd be surprised if it was more than a couple of million. Leading, well, actually, I'll do a top 6 countdown. So coming in at number 6 on the public vote is Billy Idol. In my opinion, well deserved. Rock, doesn't get much more rock than Billy Idol. He had the punk background with Generation X, and then obviously his huge solo career. Sade, up for debate, but she was definitely big, in the 80s, as a lot of us know, and amazing singer, amazing songwriter. Personally, super thrilled that coming in at 4th is INXS in the fan vote, so about 425,000 votes. So Billy's on 403, Sade at 416, INXS at 425. Luther Vandross at 488, so he's leading by about 60,000 there at number three. Four, sorry. Pink is at 557,000, so she's coming in third in the fan vote at the moment. Phil Collins coming in at number two. I'll be gobsmacked across the fan vote and the professional, the industry vote, as they call it, if Phil Collins doesn't get a Guernsey. If ever there's someone that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's him. So we'll see. You never know. So this is in no way taking away from New Edition, but they're currently leading the fan vote, and I just find that surprising. But that's probably just from where I sit down in Australia, and I'm not sure in the UK, our UK team, how big New Edition were. I know in the US they had, a number of hits. I think for us down here and outside of the US, I think there was only sort of the one or two hits, but good on them. And they're obviously got a huge fan base, or, whatever they're doing to get that many votes, fair call. But I just was a little bit surprised. So anyway, I'll keep you updated on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I know I will be outraged if Phil Collins doesn't get a Guernsey. I'll be surprised if Billy Idol doesn't, and I'd obviously, from just a sentimental viewpoint, love to see In Excess get a Guernsey as well. So there you go. That's just a bit of rock and roll gossip and news. Back on the keyboard sort of side of things, Korg. I mentioned last live stream, and it was sort of showcased at NAMM, the Phase8. It's an interesting one. So it's an interesting little module that uses acoustic sort of, I don't even know how to describe. I always struggle to describe the Phase8, but basically, I'm actually going to go to their article about the launch edition. So they've released, it's now out. You can buy what's called a launch edition, acoustic synthesis. So it uses physically vibrating bodies to generate sound enhanced with the electronic control you'd expect from a synthesizer. So it produces a sound, which, and I love marketing speak, which feels alive and responds to physical interactions such as touch and acoustic feedback, which it does. If you check out online a picture of it, it's a fascinating looking instrument. I think for us gigging musicians, I don't think there's a use case much there at all, although some absolutely will. But from a more traditional rock pop covers band viewpoint, I'm not convinced. But it's an amazing looking instrument. So yeah, if you do want the launch edition, it's now out. And I've forgotten exactly. I was having so they've got swappable, tunable steel resonators, so you can pull them in and out, and you literally can be screwing things in and out of the machine, which I think is pretty cool for a modern thing. So yeah, the launch edition. Sorry, I apologize. I've forgotten but you get. Oh, that's right. There's a pre-sale package, so there's 3 selected limited edition percussive resonators. So I can see how they're going to on-sell with the Phase8. They'll keep releasing different sort of resonators as they, get to know the instrument themselves a bit more as well. So anyway, the Phase8, if that tickles your fancy, I'm not going to talk pricing because it varies so much around the world. It's not super cheap by any means, but it's also not out of control. So that's the Phase8. And yes, Stereo, I agree. New Edition beating Phil Collins and Pink. Who'd have thought it? I'm interested for those of you that have seen people like Pink or Lady Gaga or Katy Perry. I think we've talked about it on a live stream a couple of years back, that these artists are just incredible as performers. So it's so cool watching them perform in the theatricality of the show. And I know some of our guests, we've had Mike Schmidt on, who worked with... now for Katy Perry. I mean, we had the wonderful Hazel Mills on recently, who sort of worked with, well, still does work with Kylie Minogue and stuff, and just the theatricality of those shows are just incredible. So yeah, you would think that alone would resonate with fans, but New Edition, we'll see what happens. I actually keep forgetting to Google what their big hit was for us, but I know they definitely had at least one. So it'll be interesting to see. I did actually have a Q&A, so a big thanks to Warren in Perth, UK. I've actually had the pleasure of being to Perth in the UK. So for those unaware, there's a capital city in Australia. The capital of Western Australia is Perth, named after, I'm assuming, the slightly smaller Perth in the United Kingdom. And Warren was sort of asking about pedals and, did I have any thoughts on the use of pedals, and I assumed what he meant by that was effects pedals, not sustain or MIDI switching pedals and stuff like that, because that's another whole topic. I'm really torn on this, Warren. So I love the idea of having a rack of pedals sitting at my feet with really cool effects that I can tweak on and off. But I'm also a bit of a lazy bugger, and the idea of having to drag everything I currently do to a gig and then having the cabling. And I know there are rack cases, and you can have it. Well, sorry, not rack. There are pedal cases, and you can have it all set up, and you just lift off the lid, and it's all there, and you're just plugging in the one. I get it. Or you're plugging in the power and the audio to connect it. In the olden days, I used to love how I had an old Boss phaser pedal that made the string sounds on particular songs sound amazing. I get it. But with most workstations now, and even your MODXs and your Phantom O series and stuff like that, there are so many effects options built in. I just don't know I could be bothered carrying them anymore. But if you're not doing bog standard rock or pop covers and stuff like that, and you're doing something a little bit more out there or prog stuff or whatever, I can totally see that some synth pedals, some synth effects pedals and stuff like that could be highly desirable. And if you've got the discipline to remember when to click them on and off and stuff like that, then brilliant, go for it. But I think for most of us, aside from our sustain or like sustain pedals, damper pedals, volume pedals, if you're playing an organ, sort of switching a Leslie on and off, or just MIDI switching pedals, I totally get all that. I'm just not convinced that I need extra effects pedals on top. Um, that's it, Derry. Candy Girl. That's right, it was too. New edition Candy Girl. Wow, that takes me back. So yeah, I'm just interested. I know there's some players out there that play in bands. Do you bring effects pedals, and if you're not bringing effects pedals, what are you tending to bring along? I mean, I think I admitted this on the reluctant interview I did with Paul Bindig on my own music career, as much as you'd call it a music career. And I'll give last night's gig as an example. It was a rush to get set up. Across our set list, there are only 2 or 3 songs that have piano, and every single patch for those. So I'll give an example. Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks. I use a piano and strings combo that is soaked in reverb. I don't need to cut off any of the notes that I play or whatever. I literally do not need a sustain pedal. And last night I was in a rush. I usually get the sustain pedal connected, and sometimes it's just fun to be able to hold something and give my hands a rest if it's a longer note, but otherwise it's not required. I played the whole gig last night without a sustain pedal. Now I know that is probably more an indictment on the song choice, but that's just the reality. I just don't need one. So I'm really fascinated, depending on the songs you play, and particularly if it's a piano heavy gig, you're probably using a sustain pedal all the time, particularly if you have a more traditional education background. But yeah, thanks, Warren, for the question. I think it's like most things, it's a horses for courses thing. But for me, I love the idea of cutting along pedals, but the reality is I'm probably not likely to do it. I suffer from gear acquisition syndrome with pedals. I see these new ones. I just love the look of them. I love that they're compact. They have some cool designs on the face. I'm a sucker for that stuff, but I've managed to not pull the trigger on any of them mainly because I can't afford it. But I think it's just not required for what I do at the moment. So yes, thank you, Warren. And if you've got any questions, always, let us know via, editor@keyboardchronicles.com, or message us, in the comments of this video. We definitely go back and look at those as well, and we'll cover that next episode. The other one was, I just wanted to give a podcast heads up. So this is, I pimped at the start about members. Members are already aware of pretty much all of this. Apologies, members, if I've missed one of these, but I'm pretty sure I always give you the heads up. So we're just in the process of editing a 2-part interview with Mr. David Hirschfelder. David is a film and TV composer, and in Australian terms, well, actually, John Farnham is known worldwide to a large extent, and particularly in the UK outside of Australia. But John Farnham, you've only got to Google John Farnham, YouTube search, even better, YouTube search John Farnham reaction videos, and you'll see dozens and dozens, I know I've already talked about this, reaction videos. And I talk about that in my interview with David Hirschfelder. David Hirschfelder was John Farnham's keyboard player / musical director for many years, and most importantly during what you could argue were his absolute peak years. as far as just, so popular, playing large arenas, well, stadiums too. And so David is an incredible musician and then has gone on to have a really successful film and TV career. He's also, our US listeners definitely know the Little River Band. David was part of the Little River Band when John Farnham was a singer with Little River Band. And there's a band that, there's not many more bands that have had a more torturous history than Little River Band, but David was definitely part of it at one phase. Oh, Woody, I'm not worthy. You'll probably hate me saying that, but it's wonderful to have you on, sir. Yeah, you know my thoughts. I'm a major fan and have been a fan of your channel for a long time. So, Woody, I'm going to answer your question. I'm just going to cut across. Well, actually, I'll talk about David Hirschfield and then I'll come back to that question, Woody, because that's an excellent one. So David Hirschfelder is our next two-part episode. He has lots of fascinating insights. And one of the ones that has amused me, and I don't think I've even told our members this, is I'm currently learning Playing to Win by Little River Band for my covers band. And as you know, there is, for those that are aware of the song, it's an incredible song. There is this amazing sort of synthy clav part with a lot of sequencing in the background, and David talks about that, and I can say the main riff's quite okay, but there's a lot in that song, and a lot of it really does require a sequencer or a backing track to give it the full treatment. And I know I've been having fun with my band over the last week, just getting it right, even to the extent that I'm doing it. So yeah, David Hirschfelder coming up. I think I mentioned last live stream about an amazing instrumental outfit called Public Service Broadcasting. They are incredible. We've got after David Hirschfelder's two-parter, we've got an amazing interview with Jay Wilgoose Esquire, who's an amazing, I've used amazing a lot again, is an amazing composer and performer that leads public service broadcasting. For those that do listen regularly, if you do get a chance, spend 15, 20 minutes looking at some of Public Service Broadcasting's work before you listen to the interview. And I think I say that in the intro to the show as well, because you really do need to get a feel for what they do to understand what we talk about. And his is fascinating. We also have about another 3 or 4 shows in the can that are waiting to be edited. We have another 6 interviews scheduled over the coming 3 weeks. I'm pleased to say Paul's joining me for the vast majority of those, which is great. Can't wait to have Paul back on, and Paul was hoping to join today, but in Australia it's a critical time of year. It's the end of the cricket season, and Paul plays a role in the cricket field, and so he is quite rightly otherwise engaged today. So, but Paul will be back soon as well. So I'm just going to jump back now as far as Woody. Great question. So Woody's just said, howdy, David. Always been curious about the couple of Hammond snippets you use in the podcast. Who is playing and what is the instrument? Because they sound awesome. Now, this is a funny story, Woody, because I was unaware of it. I decided to give the theme a bit of an uplift, I think it was about 6 months ago, and do a new sort of intro graphic. I purchased some royalty-free samples. So the samples you hear sadly are not me playing. I wish they were, but they are totally legally purchased, for commercial use samples. And the person actually playing them is Larry Goldings. It blew my mind when I realized, because we've obviously had the pleasure of having Larry on the show. We did a 2-part show with Larry. So yeah, those samples are actually Larry Goldings playing. So it's an absolute thrill, but yeah, just want to emphasize they are fully legally purchased samples, so I would never use anything that was just ripping off someone else. So yeah, that's where they come from, Woody. So I thought you might find that amusing. And look, yeah, just on your subsequent comment, yes, feeling is mutual, but yeah, it's so great to have you here. And Dewey, I agree, public service broadcasting are just incredible. And Dewey, I noticed you've got a question there. I was interested. Oh yeah, so Woody, that's right, and that's why the organ licks are just so tasteful. Larry's just a master. For those that haven't seen the 2-part interview with Larry, he's a reserved, modest sort of guy. But yeah, just if I had 5% of his ability, I'd be happy to know. I'd be happy. That's what I'm trying to say. That'll teach me to try and read comments and talk at the same time. Derry, you say you're interested to know how I'm getting on with the new MODX. You're going to London for a couple of days next week, and you're hoping to try one out and seems to have it all for the weekend warrior type. Look, yeah, the short answer is yes. And again, I would probably, Woody has some great thoughts on this stuff as well. I think my standard comment is the MODX series, the Phantom O series, the Korg Nautilus, which is slightly different beast. And then obviously you've got your MIDI controllers and your software-based rigs. But I'd argue that the MODX and the Phantom O series are both incredible machines. And then it really comes down to the type of sounds that you like and the architecture of actually programming the sounds. I said I used to be Korg only. I owned a Triton LE and stuff like that. Then I moved to Yamaha, and as I mentioned previously, I've had a whole bunch of Yamaha stuff. I just really, for some reason, like the Yamaha approach to programming. I find it really intuitive. I find I can do it on the fly at a gig if I need to suddenly pitch shift something or adjust something. I just love it. So, but as far as sound, so last night we played, I think it was 28, 30 songs, covering 70s, 80s, 90s. And there was only, I have a Viscount Legend 1 as my top board. So the only thing I would criticize the M7 for, and I'm not sure on the Phantom O series, but the organ sounds, I would still argue, have improved on the MODX M, but they're still not what they could be. And so that's why I love bringing the Viscount Legend 1 if I've got a gig that involves two keyboards, because the organ sounds on that are incredible. Just like if you packed a Hammond SK or something like that. It's just, or a Kruma Mojo. They're all brilliant at what they do, and I just love that. But aside from sort of 3, 4, maybe 5 songs that I totally rely on the Viscount Legend 1, there is nothing that MODX M doesn't cover. And I said that I'd argue the Phantom O series is the same as well. And yeah, so Derry, you mentioned, so Woody has some great MODX M videos. They're just great, and definitely do check them out. So you've never been a Yamaha user, Derry, but the CK61, I nearly pulled the trigger on one of those as well. When Paul always criticizes me for shifting boards too early. So I owned a YC61 pre them updating the organ model. So I remember playing, I think I played one gig with the Y61, and there was a keyboard player in the audience that was from another state in Australia. He was traveling to see family or something. And he said, "Look, love the show, David." He said, "But geez, that organ sound sucked." And he didn't know what board I was using, and I'd already heard the criticisms of the YC61 organ. They updated, and it's actually really, really quite good now. But I ended up on shifting that unit because it just didn't have enough other sounds for me. Although ironically now I'm using a Viscount Legend 1, which probably has the same criticism, that it struggles a little bit on the synth sounds and stuff like that. But the CK61 was one I was seriously looking at just as a really nice lightweight second board. But as far as leaving so you've got a Nord Stage 2 at home. Look, if you're going to upgrade from a Nord Stage 2 to a MODX M, the only thing I'd just warn you is the organ sounds. The Nord Stage 2 is likely to have better organ sounds than the MODX M. The only thing that redeems the MODX M is there are third-party sound packs, plus Yamaha themselves have offered some slightly better organ ones. But I apologise, I can't remember the name, but I did purchase a third-party organ pack which makes the tone wheel and the Leslie Sims sort of sound a little bit better. And I do use it as a backup. If it's a one keyboard gig, I bring the MODX M. And as you know, most punters aren't picking up on this anyway. It's just more from a purist viewpoint that it's, Woody, none of my, well, we have a show reel online. If you Google, on YouTube, or Google and YouTube, if you do Gloss, GLOSS, live rock show reel, you'll see a small show reel of some of the songs we play. It's all classic 80s cover stuff. As I say in my interview, I am actually not much of a player. I can say without doubt that Derry, Woody, pretty much everyone on this live stream or watching afterwards would be a better player than me. I tend to make up for it in that I pay a lot of attention to sounds, and we also choose songs that aren't too taxing. So I mentioned Playing to Win before. A lot of people would probably just pick up Playing to Win and not have to work that hard at it. I have to work hard at it. So I'm not a great player. I just more take pride in the sounds and stuff like that. I'm one of those guys that plays lots of root notes and fifths and thirds sometimes, and I do try and get a bit more complex than that. I'm a bad player as far as finger positions. I'm terribly thumb heavy, and have sore thumbs because I'm using the thumb as the anchor moving up and down the keyboard, which is obviously not what you should be doing all the time. So I'm a bit of a weekend warrior in that respect, but appreciate the thought, Woody. And yeah, so Gloss 100% live rock show reel, there's definitely a 6-minute show reel that sort of showcases roughly what we do. And I'm lucky to have an amazing singer, and the other band guys in the band are excellent as well. Derry, if Yamaha released a YC61 with a CK61 interface and versatility, I think they'd have a real winner. Yeah, agree. That's one of the things that appealed about the CK was just I love the simplicity of it. And then Woody's saying, I found the YC very inspiring. I play a ton of organ on it. It renewed my Hammond interest. That was before the rotary upgrade. The Rose and acoustic. Yeah, actually, that's true, Woody. The pianos on the YC are probably superior to the ones on the Viscount. I think Viscount have still got some work to do with their pianos. What I've done with my rig is I use Mainstage basically as a MIDI switcher. So I do have the odd software-based sound that I add to my rig, but the it switches the MODX and the Viscounts patches to the right ones for the song I'm playing. I have some redundancy there, so I'm going to use a really classic Four to the Floor cover band example, All Fired Up by Pat Benatar. I've just got a sort of it's not a saw wave, it's more of a string/saw pad. It's more of a pad underneath All Fired Up because there's not really keyboards in All Fired Up. I have the same on the Viscount Legend 1. It just doesn't sound as good, but it's a redundancy. If for some reason the MODX falls over in that song, I can play it on the Viscount Legend 1. So I think you're right. The YC61 definitely did better on the pianos. I just find, even the Viscount, it's got a little bit of work to do there. I nearly bought a YC73 instead of the Viscount Legend 1. I don't regret the Viscount because of the organ, but yeah, they're great machines. So that's, we're heading up to the half hour. I try and keep the live streams an hour, but we did have one last question, sorry, and that was, how do we choose our guests for the podcast? So it's a really good point, and I'll try and keep this a short answer. It depends. So we obviously have a bucket list, and I mentioned, I think in my interview, that I have this big spreadsheet of guests, and it literally runs to hundreds of people that we've both had on, have approached and are waiting to get answers on. We've had people that have said no, people we haven't approached yet, but no, we would like to talk to. So that's one source of truth. The other, and we use that to coordinate all of our inquiries. We then receive pitches. So just in the last couple of weeks, I think I've had 2 or 3 pitches, and it'll depend on the pitch, whether we go ahead with it or not. And the criteria are purely subjective. So you don't have to be some, megastar for me to go, oh, wow, I'd love to talk to that person. We've actually found that based on views and the stories told and that sometimes it's the lesser known players that are the more interesting. Some of the better known players are more polished and are used to answering questions and tend to know when to sort of cut off and not give too much away. Whereas the lesser known players are more open. They're maybe earlier in their career and so on. And so you get lots of fascinating insights. There are variations on both sides. So it's not based on being known. It's more about what their potential life story or career is and whether it's got something a little bit different for all of you out there to hear about. So I'm actually not going to give away the name, but I've also partly forgotten. We have a guest coming up in the next couple of weeks that I had never heard of, which doesn't mean much. There are lots of people I haven't heard of, but that are extremely well respected. But his story and what he does with music, with the community he works in and whatever, just absolutely fascinated me. And that was a pitch. And I went back straight away and said, yep, love to. It is rare, that said, that I would ever knock back. So, if Elton John's management approached me, I'm sure, Woody, you're the same. If Elton John's management approached, hey, can Elton do an interview with you? I'm not about to go, oh, look, He's already answered pretty much everything. No, thank you. Of course, I'm going to jump at that with both feet. But yeah, choosing guests is based on us reaching out, pictures, and just things that we stumble across. Um, yeah, it's highly varied. We also just get regular PR releases from record companies or PR people representing indie artists, saying this person's got an album out. Um, and then we just reach out. So I'm not going to mention a name because sadly it's ended in a no at this stage. And also I don't want to breach the confidentiality with the PR person because they're a great person and they also have other artists on their roster. But we had a potential amazing guest that's iconic composer and keyboard player from the last 30 years. Still going strong, has major top 40 hits in most, places around the world. PR person was interested, pitched it to management, and management were the gatekeeper and said no. So it can be quite fraught. It can take many years to actually get a real interview to translate. Management people tend to change, PR people tend to change. So you just keep working at it, and so we will do follow up. I'll follow up in 6 to 12 months saying, hey, is this person still not able to speak, or is now a good time? The other part of the equation is just syncing it in with if they've got a new record coming out. Quite rightly, the PR and management people are wanting to interviews to promote the album. So that tends to be the good juncture. Or when people have not just come off tour, but a few weeks off tour and sort of at a bit of a loss, what do I do now? If they don't have another project straight away, they may be keen to talk about the tour that's just gone and what they're doing else in their what else they're doing in their creative life. Now, oh, Woody, I don't know. I'm sure you won't mind this. So, Derry, I agree with your comment. Woody is way too modest to agree. I have asked Woody once before, and the man is such a modest legend that he is refusing at this stage. I'm hoping to wear him down one day because he is an amazing player. But yes, sorry if I'm breaching your confidence there, Woody, but you do deserve more exposure even than what you currently get. And I think you would be a fascinating interviewee, but totally get it as well. I know how fraught when Paul insisted on interviewing me. It's not the most comfortable position to be in, so I do get it. So yeah, I think we'll probably leave it at that for this live stream. It's wonderful to have a few more join us as well. It's so great to see you all. We're hoping to make these roughly fortnightly, 2 to 3 weekly, just with all the other interviews and needing to earn a living and so on. I'd love to do these a couple of times a week, but I think it would probably be overkill anyway. There's not that much keyboard news out there. I actually struggled to find a lot of interesting keyboard related stuff. But thanks to you and those great questions and whatever, and I think we've got a great community and we can keep working on that. And yeah, keep those questions coming in. I appreciated the pedal question and how we find guest questions. We'll just keep that up. And Derry for your, and everyone else's, Woody for your questions and that. Yeah, actually, Woody, your co-host interview, I would love you to interview him. It's due for a revisit, and I wouldn't expect you to realize this, but very, very early on in the podcast, pre-video, so when we were an audio-only podcast, Paul was in my first 3 or 4, maybe 5 interviews because he's keyboard player in an amazing Pink Floyd tribute band. So I actually have interviewed Paul, but that was now sort of 5 years ago. So I think that's a good point. I think it's time for a redux on him. So again, thank you all. Really appreciate you joining. I'll see you in a couple of weeks on the live stream, but otherwise, yeah, really appreciate your support. I hope you enjoy the upcoming interviews, and we will speak soon. And next time, I remember to turn the audio on from the start. Thanks, team. Talk soon. Bye.